about YLN and what you do there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me today. So Hope Rikkelman, director of Yazidi Legal Network, and what we do, or what at the beginning when we started to have the idea of setting up the network, was really to support the Yazidi community here in the Netherlands, because there's quite a bit of steps that can be made to kind of support the community, the victim community here. And I think that when we started in 2018, that discussion wasn't necessarily up and running, so we really felt the need and that there was a gap to see how we could contribute to that. And also with the idea of giving witnesses and victims information to access to justice here, kind of making sure that we could refer them to the right mechanisms or the right jurisdictions on the crimes that were committed against them, also by Dutch nationals.
Okay. Is there? And you mentioned that there's a Yazidi population in the Netherlands.
So there's that's very interesting. It's a small community.
Okay.
At the beginning, we thought between 2,000 and 3,000, but the last estimate that I heard was a little bit higher, between 4,000 and 5,000, which is quite a bit. I mean, it's a small community, having that in the Netherlands is substantial. There's a little bit of difference between the Yazidis that have been here after the fall of Saddam Hussein, and then the ones that came after 2014 or just a little bit before that.
Okay.
We see that the younger population right now at the moment is much more active and proactive in supporting their community. And I think that the older generation that's here wants the same and is also fighting for justice, but they have a little bit more struggle with like language, knowing kind of the legal landscape here in the Netherlands. So that's nice that we have, our ambassadors, our Yazidi ambassadors, who are the face and the voice of the organization. It's a shame that they're not here today, but they weren't available.
No problem.
But that they really speak out for the community, and that they understand the culture and what happened in 2014 and on, and really can tell us and myself and the organization what their needs are. So really kind of bottom up what the community is asking for and what kind of questions are pending. Like I said, there's a different kind of population within here in the Netherlands. I do think that a lot of the younger generation would like to continue their lives and study and find nice jobs, and they really understand that going back to the region, so Sinjar and Kurdistan, even Iraq, is just very difficult. You're talking about property rights, you're talking about victims that still need to rehabilitate. The support system within the region is not amazing, to say the least, I guess. So I think also there that, it's been 7 years now. I think that a lot of them are also realizing that going back probably is not necessarily an option. So I think that that's an internal struggle within the community right now. What are we going to do? What does our future look like? My whole intention when we started this was really to have the Yazidis themselves as a community be more organized, to really kind of mentor them in that setting up a support system for their own community. And I think that I've always wanted to really share my expertise and my network. So what we do right now is we have volunteers within that have different nationalities, different expertise, so very interdisciplinary students helping us, but also legal experts, people that have worked at the ICC or the ICTY, helping us and guiding us, but really having the Yazidis themselves be on top of that structure as the ambassadors. And I think that really works. So everybody does the work within the organization pro bono, so it's really nice to see that there's an intrinsic motivation to do the work that we do and to support each other. At the same time, that's a challenge, but I think that for now, it works quite well.
Okay.
So I think, talking about challenges, there are a few. To start off, we're a really small organization, right? We do have about, normally it fluctuates, but we have between 30 and 50 people helping us on a voluntary basis. Like I said, different nationalities, different countries. But that also means that people have to have time. So that's one of the main challenges, at least for myself, and a little bit more the coordinators or the managers within the organization, to keep everybody motivated and to have that kind of time capacity to actually put the effort into the projects. So that's something you definitely need to be on top of. And the other thing, and that's maybe even more important, is the community themselves, right? You really also need to motivate them, but also find a balance in not pushing them. They are, some of them are traumatized, or at least families are traumatized. They have family members that were killed, just absolutely terrible things, PTSD, and really keeping that balance within what do we ask from them and what can they give the organization or give back to the community needs to be feasible.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main challenge, and really getting people together within the community is also difficult, because there's within the community also political differences within what happened in 2014 and on, and if you also look at collaboration with other NGOs, there's a lot of competition for funding. That's something that I always say is I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. We're really small. We don't have a lot of finances, and we can make with what we get. And I'm quite proud of that, because I think that makes it more feasible for us to actually fulfill our goals and our aims, because it's not about funding, it's about the actual work. And I think that's a challenge, but at the same time something that we do really well. And again, I think the community is the most important, and keeping them sane and working together with each other is probably the most difficult.
Yeah. How comfortable are people coming to you and talking to you? Do they feel safe coming to a Dutch NGO and saying, hey, listen to my experience? Or have you encountered some difficulty in getting stories out of people?
So, really good question. One thing is that we don't do victim testimonies ourselves, right?
Okay.
There are a lot of other NGOs that have done the documentation efforts on the ground already within the region. And also, we have a good relationship with our war crimes unit here and the public prosecutor's office and lawyers, and they are the ones that should talk directly to the victims. We really want to be the referral kind of matchmaking person or body here in the Netherlands, that we can give them that support system, right? So when we do have victims or witnesses or Yazidis that want to share their story with us, we give them that opportunity. So we have a blog and we have a podcast. So those are the kind of tools and platforms that they can use. But if we're talking about international crimes or crimes committed against them, we really make sure that they have independent lawyers that they can talk to, or we can refer them to other NGOs that work in the jurisdictions that are applicable, or we can refer them to to one of our contacts within the war crimes unit or the Dutch public prosecutor's office.
Okay. No, that's a very efficient way to
Should be a safe haven, right? We have to give what I think is important is that we give them options and information, and that's
and they will do with it what they want.
Exactly, because again, it needs to be their choice. They need to feel comfortable themselves, and we're that kind of foreportal of making sure that they are comfortable, building that relationship with them, explaining what the legal framework is here in the Netherlands, and that works quite well.
Nice. You mentioned that you want this to be an organization for the Yazidis, run by the Yazidis in the long run. Do you see that happening right now, or do you see any obstacles to that happening?
Yeah. So I think a lot of us also have our day jobs, so financially, we can do this work that we're doing right now. And with me, I mean the whole organization. We have a new board in place that is really going to be focusing on these next steps to find structural financing or funding for hopefully a few of the ambassadors that actually want to pursue this work or want to continue it. So again, my incentive is not personal in the sense that I want them to be able to have opportunities and to give them that. Again, my own network, to share that with them and to make sure that we kind of support them. So at the moment, again, we don't have a lot of finances. We don't need it. But in the long term or long run, we definitely do need that. But I think that the way that we work is interesting for donors, is interesting as a concept or format that we have for other NGOs. So I'm very optimistic. I'm very hopeful.
No, excellent.
So I definitely do think that financial sustainability will come.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there are a few things, right? We have this UN body right now that are collecting evidence, analyzing it, and seeing what they potentially can do with it, making files for other public prosecutors' offices. And one of the things that we've seen, also learning from, let's say, the situation in Syria, is that it's very difficult or not feasible or possible to prosecute within the region because of a lot of issues, which I don't think we should get into right now. So a lot of the international criminal law community has turned their eye to national prosecution. So really seeing like what kind of jurisdiction is applicable, where can we bring a case before which courts, what kind of mechanisms can we use. So looking at UNITAD and also the IIIM on Syria, I think that them collecting, analyzing information and kind of supporting the national prosecutions is the future right now, especially for the Yazidi crimes, seeing that they were done by a lot of different national perpetrators with different nationalities. So if we look at the Netherlands, a lot of the foreign fighters are returning right now. So there's quite an influx of them returning or being repatriated to the Netherlands. And that focus of nationally prosecuting is very interesting. I think that that's something that we also focus on in supporting that process. So seeing how we can get the community, victims and witnesses, or survivors and witnesses, to talk to these different bodies, to understand what that legal framework is. So, if your perpetrator might be Dutch or German or Belgium, that we're able to refer them to the German, Dutch, or Belgium authorities. And I think that the expertise is really growing. A lot of these war crimes units work together with different departments, so let's say a terrorism department, and this kind of co-construction of cumulative charges that they're researching or investigating is really something of the future. Now, at the same time, I don't think that you should only focus on this. I do think that prosecution should also happen within the region if possible, because a lot of the survivors and victims are still there. So it should be a kind of hybrid concept. But again, it's very difficult within the region right now because of multiple issues. If you look at Iraq, they still have the death penalty, so how do you coordinate that? How do you cooperate with that? A lot of the European countries, don't necessarily want to send information that way because of the death penalty. I think one thing to mention is that we're a legal organization. And we've always said that law is our language. And even though, and everybody that studies or works in like a legal sphere knows that politics are really intertwined into law, which is unfortunate, I think. But that's just the world we live in. So I think that we're very careful with cooperating with any government, especially with Iraqi governments. Sharing information is something that we don't do, but at the same time we don't do witness testimonies ourselves. But I do think it's very important to have that balance within having a good relationship with somebody. So not necessarily cooperating, but having the contacts that if you do need something, that you can pick up the phone and call them. Bigger organizations have the same issues. If you look at Unitalts and ICMP, for instance, they need to have some sort of relationship or cooperation with the government because they need access to the location or the region, so Sinjar, but also where all of the mass graves are. And I know that this is very difficult at times, but it's also necessary to be able to do the work that they do. So in that sense, again, we try to maintain good relationships, but we don't necessarily cooperate.
Okay. It's diplomatic kind of.
Yeah, very. Yeah, so one of the very interesting question, because one of the starting points of setting up this organization was we saw that a lot of documentation efforts were being done on the ground, but that this information doesn't or isn't transformed into case files. And a lot of the times that these organizations on the ground, they have witness testimonies, right? And then if you look at the different jurisdictions or states, they all have potential perpetrator files. So you need to put these two together, connect them, and I think that kind of link sometimes is missing. And this definitely is what Unitalts or the IIIM is trying to accomplish. But what we said is, for us, it's a little bit more easier to request information or to share information as an NGO compared to, let's say, the Dutch government requesting information on a certain person. And with GDPR rules and privacy rules, that sometimes that doesn't flow really well. So what we said is, let's make a database with names of Dutch potential perpetrators, or at least those that left the country, excluding children, and focusing on the females and males that left the country, and see if we can share this information with our partner organizations on the ground that have been doing the documentation efforts. So very much linking those potential perpetrator files with the victim testimonies. And then we focus mainly on war names and on physical appearances, because survivors and victims normally know what their perpetrator looked like. And sometimes they do know their nationalities, and sometimes they do know their war names or their names in very in some instances, but kind of seeing if we can link that information, at least for the Netherlands, very much focused on the Netherlands. And we do this all based on an MOU. So there's, a very, very good concept of what we share, when and where and with whom, and then what kind of information or what they will do with this information. And normally what the process is that they throw our information through their database or our names and see if there are any hits. And what then our internal process is, if there is a hit, and then that organization will ask the survivor witness if they are allowed to share their information, or if they want to contact us, because there might be a potential link with the Netherlands. So assuming that then prosecutions would also be in the Netherlands, or at least making sure that we can connect them to our war crimes unit or a public prosecutor's office, or to get them an independent lawyer to kind of mentor or kind of guide them into the process and talk to them to see if they want to actually share their information or not, because sometimes they just don't want to share their information. They're scared, or they just want to leave it behind them, which is always their own decision. We make sure that that's something that's very important. So there are a few organizations that we have MOUs with, among others the Unitalts and the IIIM, and I think that sharing based on good faith and good relationship is really essential to this work, because otherwise everybody kind of sits on their own island and tries to make the best of it, but you need to kind of really put the puzzle pieces together.
And keep the puzzle together.